Thank you for having me. I welcome on stage Francesca Bria and Katalin Gennburg, who will be talking about the topic. And first of all, this will be in English. And we will also take questions like latest after like 30 minutes to open up the Q&A. So to my left, I have Francesca Bria. She's famous for being the CTO and Digital Innovation Officer from the city of Barcelona. You're like just now I think almost like 3 years in that position. We had you 2 years ago with the State Secretary Rickards, and the label was like Rebel City, and you also did the 2 great projects, Decent and Decode, which were European-funded projects which dealing with decentralization. And you did also like digital social innovation projects. And last but not least, I would point out she did a terrific writing with Yevgeny Morozov on rethinking the smart city, which is part of the topic we are having right now. We're trying to go beyond the smart city, there was just a session before that on the topic, and see what actually means like to regain the power back to the citizens. And to the far left, I have Katalin. She's a member of the Berlin Parliament. She just was today in a session where you literally are talking about the city like Berlin and what's the current status. So you will give us the Berlin perspective. And I have a second hat here next to my moderator position. I'm like the substitute for Ulrike Huemer from the city of Vienna, who should be here since we're trying to create here like a city alliance, and I will helpfully have good news on certain topics. And what we're trying to do with that panel is A, creating a city alliance, and B, going beyond that, what I think it's current situation on cities. So there's a lot of expectations. We have the current situation, especially in Europe, that we are technologically completely independent from companies who A, don't pay taxes, and B, don't create really jobs here. And it's not just what it used to be easy, like from one direction, from Silicon Valley, but also like a second direction now coming through the BI, the Belt Road Initiative, where basically Chinese companies will like steamroll into the smart city, and especially like even on surveillance level, on a higher level. So first of all, I would like to ask you what happened in the last 2 years on the city level in Barcelona, what's new, and shortly explain the technical manifesto, which I think it's more like specifications, and what's behind it.
Great. So, well, I've already been in a variety of panels here, so
we know.
That's good. But it's good. I think I would like this panel to be also more participatory, because I think building a smart city really means defining and co-shaping together with citizens and the local ecosystem the future of the city. So I think this conversation should be really more participatory. So I hope we have time to involve you guys, to involve people here. So, well, what we've been doing in Barcelona, and we keep doing, is exactly in this direction of what it means to build a smart city where you can take back technological sovereignty, which also means, giving back more power to the citizens and getting, in a participatory way, the citizens to be able to set the direction for the technological change. So what is really important is that the smart city is not really about all these kind of gadgets, technological infrastructure only, like sensor connectivity, data, but it really should give answers to concrete problems that we have. And we shouldn't start from, putting all these technologies into our cities and then, going about, okay, why are we doing this? What the problems are we trying to solve, and nobody really knows, and what is the business model? Is it sustainable? Can we create value locally? Can we create better jobs? Can we involve the local, startups, SMEs, cooperatives, citizens themselves, and big companies as well, because we need the big companies, of course, to do their part, but can we create positive value? And so basically we started to do a lot of projects in Barcelona like that, starting from a large-scale participatory democracy project that you may know. It's a hybrid online and offline. So we have citizens participating in neighborhoods, setting the agenda of the city, and then through the Barcelona Decidim, which is a digital platform that's open source, we've been able to filter a lot of proposals coming from the citizens, 70%, and then set an agenda which is really about affordable housing, energy transition, climate change fight, rethinking mobility in the city, which is one big topic. And then we started collaborating with other cities, so that's where we are working with Berlin, I mean with Christian in particular, the Senator for Digitalization, which is his team, but also with Katalin and many other people working on new, city models. And we have a city network of many cities that are collaborating on these policies, and we are changing the approach to say, okay, why don't we start from citizens' rights? So instead of starting again from, big tech vendors or the technologies that we want to use, let's put citizen rights at the very center. And so together with New York City and Amsterdam and the backing of UN Habitat, which is the UN agencies for cities, we started the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights. And so you find it at in the portal citiesfordigitalrights.org. And as you can see there, basically we are creating a shared agenda with many other cities around the world that start from, basic principles of, access to connectivity for everybody should be a basic right. The question of protecting privacy, information self-determination, using ethics, security, and privacy by design in the way we develop digital services, working more with open technologies, so open source infrastructure, open standards, and open licensing, so that, when you develop a technology in the public sector, everybody can reuse it, so you get away from vendor lock-in. So we are, sponsoring this campaign from the Free Software Foundation, which is public money, public code, so that we are able then to make sure that the digital infrastructure that we develop with public money is yours. I mean, it's our infrastructure, belongs to all of us. It's not owned by a particular firm or by the state only. And then we are also looking at diversity, obviously participatory democracy, and the question of data. So we are joining forces with other cities to make sure that the data that we produce in the city, because all the time when you put connectivity, sensors, fiber, the new technology, you're producing a lot of data. So the question is, who owns this data? And can we use this data to create public value? I mean, can we make sure that citizens feel comfortable sharing the data because they know that they have data sovereignty, so that their fundamental rights are preserved, and we use cryptography as a human right. So you will see, it's actually, I mean, now it's I'm explaining a little bit what the principles are, but it's pretty clean and simple for cities to be able to say, okay, I want to join, and then we create a shared roadmap so that cities can collaborate in setting, projects and make it real. So at the end of the day, I think what governments really need to understand, and what we all need to understand, is that digitalization starts from us, from citizens. It starts from at the city level, bottom up. It's not about writing, lots of government strategies, lots of top-down plans that never get, implemented. And also beyond that, it's really about regaining democratic rights, human rights, our democracy, and sovereignty, which is political and economic. So it's really about what kind of model, what kind of cities, do we want to live in the future. So that's why I think that the participation of all of us and all of you in redefining this agenda is so critical. Well, I stop it here.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees on those points. And I think the important question would be something where it goes more than into the technical things, like how do we achieve that? I think we come back later to that on procurement, or where we have other examples from other cities where it works. And now we go from this let's say, the road to heaven, almost at least there's a roadmap, and I think this was the biggest achievement almost from Barcelona, is creating actually an alternative narrative, what the old term smart city used to be. And that's great because we didn't have that in Europe at all. I mean, there was, I think, one narrative for a short time was Münig's with their own operating system, which collapsed under the Social Democrats. And so the one question would be then like, what's the roadmap for Berlin, Katalin, at the moment? What are the examples in Berlin which gives you hope? And what are areas in Berlin right now on digitization that could go better?
Hello, yeah, thank you for this complicated question, because, I mean, as you may know, we have a totally different situation, because our Bürgermeister is not a former house squatting guy. So, I mean, in Barcelona you have a totally different political situation. And as far as I understood until now, the last 2 years that we met, and I learned a lot from what you're doing in Barcelona, I learned that it has a lot to do with where you come from. So, I mean, the history of the crisis and how to renew the state and how to find ways to give back the state to the people. And I mean, what we have in Berlin, we have a leftist government with the Greens and Social Democrats and the Left Party. But we also have like a smart city ideal we are still we stuck in. And I think what is totally different is we look, some of us are looking to cities like Barcelona to see how you as an ambassador for left strategies, for technology, politics, what we could do. But there's still like old strategies we have to overcome. So this is, I would say, the big problem, how to deal in reality with what we already have and how to overcome this. But anyway, we are now we are looking to getting a new digitalization strategy for Berlin, which is situated at the Green State Secretary Christian Rickertz, who is who takes care of this task, and this should be very important, I guess, to everybody, because I think we really have to intervene in this process, because until now it's not very wide open, it's not very participatory. And what I believe, I mean, I'm coming from like urban planning, like city development strategies. I'm not a techie, but I really want to find possibilities to bring together like digitalization and city development to bring it back to the people. And I totally think we really have to find ways how to intervene to how this strategy will be built. So this is, first of all, there will be a network, let's say an alliance of people from Weizenbaum Institute and other like digital natives who come together to intervene in this digitalization strategy process, which is ongoing now. And as well, we have the City Lab. Walter, you can tell more about it, but the City Lab was like an idea of this government to open up in the first 100 days. So we are a bit late with the City Lab, but as well there was a big discussion what this City Lab should be, and still it is not really clear if it is very, it's like a really experimental place to talk about digitalization from bottom up. But this as well will happen now in June, that this City Lab will take place. And another thing is, of course, the digitalization of the administration. There's a big strategy working on from the government. And last but not least, I mean, what we really have to take care as well is that we had the big protests against the Google campus, which of course is not forgotten in this city. And now we are looking to get the Siemens campus. And of course we should take care about those alliances that are new, that those tech big tech companies are making alliances with like old-fashioned industries like Siemens, and how they try to get in touch with science and what they want to implement, and how the city will be shaped in these processes. So this is what's going on. It's not like big news, like a big revolution is not going on until now, as far as I see, but there are really, really important steps that we really have to take care of, and some of us could intervene.
Thank you. So as my head from the update from Vienna is that they have in their new city, smart city strategy, they're getting like the topic of the digital rights of the cities in there, and also like the technological sovereignty, which is good, and which brings me to another point. They also will have it in there, like if somebody uses like the physical infrastructure of a city, that they have to pay back on the data infrastructure. And that brings me to the three, from my point of view, interesting points, what can be done. The one thing is we talked about procurement, like how you spend actually money, which is quite a lot, on the right thing. The other thing is regulation. The LA transportation example used to be like great talk by Stefan Kaufmann on Monday, meaning everybody is using the street has to bring back the data to the city, so the traffic optimization goes better. And then the big question, and that's then getting more hairy, we have the discussion right now in Berlin, is like ownership, that goes from the one thing from infrastructure providers like energy grid, and also like housing. And so I would like to have your thoughts, being in Spain more effective from austerity crisis back from the Euro crisis. What happened there and what actually needs to be done that in order on the long run you gain the technological independence, the main core things to shift a little bit to the other side?
Yeah, so I think we have to basically answer these questions with concrete proposals, right? I mean, I think actually in Spain, but definitely in Barcelona, we have an approach that is less, okay, we think that regulation will solve everything, you know? If we make a rule and we make a law, we'll solve everything. I think in Germany you are pretty much on that side. I think we believe that, you know, regulation is important, and if you regulate well, obviously you have a better effect on what you do, but that it is important that you come with concrete plans and projects and you work it out together with people. So I think we have to see digitalization as an enabler, which of course, I mean, you have to do it properly, and we have to see who is governing the infrastructure, how we rebuild our infrastructure. This is all important, but at the end it has to be mission-led. So we have to see, okay, how do we make sure that we have a plan to implement sustainable mobility? What does that look like? You know, in Barcelona we have created 3 times the number of bicycle lanes. We have now all electric vehicles in the cities, so all public vehicles are electric. We are doubling the number of electric recharges so that we can prepare for the electric mobility, and also looking at driverless mobility in terms of, you know, working with 5G and the data. We are tackling climate change very strongly, and of course the climate crisis. So we have done a project where we close off 12 districts to traffic, so the cars can only get around the district, and we recuperated 60% of public space, which now is a citizen green space. And these citizen green spaces become new spaces for new services or economic activities which benefit the residents. And this has been very good, participatory, and so on. In terms of like infrastructure projects, I want to mention things like Barcelona owns the fiber. So we have 700 kilometers of fiber, public fiber, which is owned by the city. And I think this is really an asset, because on top of that, we're building an Internet of Things sensor network, which is interoperable and open standards. So it's now reused in Dubai, in Helsinki, other Spanish cities took it on board because they can implement it. And then we have our own public repository, like a data lake with a standardized ontology. And I've created a city data office with 40 people working there, which can do machine learning and artificial intelligence on the data in order to solve concrete problems, you know, waste management, energy consumption. We also created a public operator for solar energy, which now is providing energy for the public buildings, and retrofitting the building is going to be really important, and for the energy consumption and all of that. So it's super concrete on some level, and then you have to see what works, how do you scale specific projects, and how do you make sure like everybody can participate, so it's not only targeted to specific, group, only to manufacturing or only to the car industry, but it's really creates spillover throughout the economy, I would say. And so I think when it comes to the rules in procurement, for instance, is super important, but I know this is very boring for people here, maybe because all the time is like procurement, it's like, this is not sexy, what is it, but it's a lot important. It's like, this is what governments do, we get citizen money and we spend it to buy services and to develop technology, and a lot of money gets spent like that. So in Barcelona we have put all this on the public, on a digital platform, so that the small companies as well and all the citizens can check how we spend the contracts, so it's transparent. I mean, cracking corruption is really important, in particular in Spain and other countries. And basically, we have created new standards for procurement that look at, minimum salary, energy, sustainability clauses, the kind of gender balance in the contracts that we give. But then we created specific technology sovereignty clauses, and this is about the data. So they're called data sovereignty, and every contract we run in the city of Barcelona, can be waste management, electric bicycle, or whatever. Whoever wins the bid has to give back to the city of Barcelona the data in machine-readable format. So a format that can be consumed directly with the machine, and it should be open standards. What this means is that the data becomes owned by all of us. It becomes a common good, which is owned by the citizens of Barcelona. And then we protect the privacy, so it's privacy and security by design, and we work with cryptographers to do that properly. And then we can open up the data in an open data platform where, cooperative startups, companies, citizens themselves can use the data to build the future data-driven services. And I think this is super important, because otherwise you get all these critical resources locked in. And I mean, if you look at the public procurement, only very few companies win them all. I think for you this is super critical, because if you are a small company, if you are a startup, if you have a cooperative, if you are even a citizen association, you will never get to win those bids. It's very difficult. So we need to open up the way we do procurement and making sure that we have this kind of ethical digital standards in the way we develop the services. And by the way, all these policies are in a free software platform. You can find them barcelona.cat/digital standards. And they link to GitHub, so anybody can take them, also the city of Berlin, by the way. You can copy them, you can translate them, you can adjust them to your needs, and really the objective is to have this kind of pan-European ethical digital standards for cities that can be implemented everywhere. And I mean, I think that this approach makes sense for a lot of cities. Also the open source, if you look at now AI field, artificial intelligence, everybody's using open source libraries, it's the way of working. And if the cities want to develop an application, let's say in transportation, they can then share it with other cities. They can work with communities of free software developers. We can invest in the local community, in the local talent, and we can create better jobs here instead of giving all the money to the few companies that, by the way, are not European. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I have just a question. Politically, it's interesting how to set up those standards. I mean, do you have like a big, super many people asking for those standards, or is it that there's a small group of experts who say, okay, let's do it like that because we know this is the right way to do? Because this is what I'm missing now in Berlin. We don't really have. I mean, we have like huge group of people asking for housing rights and expropriation of houses, but we do not have like a social movement asking for like a digital agenda that was made up by the people. So the question is how to set up those standards.
I don't know if I mean, okay, so as I said at the very beginning, I think with digital, you know, the right approach is not, you know, going in the street, you know, to like the regular citizen and start saying, do you know how to do encryption, and do you care about your privacy? Do you want data sovereignty? I mean, people will say, what are you talking about? But also if you go out and you say, what is the smart city? Nobody knows. I mean, they will tell you, I don't care. But if you explain them that this has a direct impact on housing, on energy, on climate change, on participation, on their democracy, on their basic rights, then, you know, they start to, on their jobs, because, you know, otherwise we're just not gonna have decent jobs, then they start to understand, okay, so yeah, we need to be involved into creating the digital strategy because it's just about the future of our cities. So I think that we have to be able to explain that this is what is happening. And then I think, I mean, for instance, what I hear in this conference, it is very clear what they're asking people here. I mean, the Republica community, I mean, 7,000, how many people are here? A lot of people that are participating in many parts, they are asking a people-centric, rights, preserving digital agenda, and they're here in Berlin. So, I mean, if I would be a city official, I would say, right, that's what we need to do. So,
Absolutely.
you know, I think it's really clear.
I think it did. The beauty about that is also like finally there's a big city, and with big city I just mean like a city above 1 million, who shows that it can be done, because the concepts are actually like kind of boring on the technical level completely, and also outdated, like open data and stuff like that is out there for decades as a concept, but nobody actually does it. And I think on Monday even the German Bundespräsident was saying finally that the digitization has to be democratized, which means like transparency and exactly those points down the road. And so we are hoping on that finally somebody in Germany makes it to what we always call it Chefsache, and actually walks the talk. I mean, that's like in Berlin or on a city level and also on a federal level overdue since more than 10 years. We have like a big broadband issue in Germany, which is for industry country kind of embarrassment. And with that, I would also see if there are like any questions from the audience, because we thought we will split that half-half. So if you have any questions so far, please go forward to the microphone over here and ask the questions.
Hi, my name is Katrin Elsemann. I am the Managing Director of the Social Entrepreneurship Network in Germany. We are supporting social innovators, social startups, and social entrepreneurs. Thank you very much for this very nice discussion, which I enjoy to follow. I have two questions, I guess, or one definitely to Katalin Gennburg. There is actually a high interest and demand of the people in Berlin to see what's happening with the digital strategy for Berlin, particularly since the smart city concept that was there a couple of years ago is not necessarily materializing in anything substantial. And you said it before, you try to overcome maybe old concepts and try to develop something new. And there are various groups there. We just had a spontaneous meetup actually outside to discuss just that. And there are various groups who really like to participate there. And you mentioned you are going to intervene. And since you're also part of the Senate and the government, I really hope that it's going to be not necessarily an intervention, but a participatory process to develop a sustainable digitalization strategy. And to both of you, maybe the question, one of the biggest challenges we have in Berlin, and I guess also in Barcelona, also I'm not so sure, is housing. And you said it before, how a smart city and data can also be, or the right use of data and the right use of a digital strategy for a city can also be very, very profitable for the housing challenge. So could you explore that a bit further? Like, how are we, I mean, it doesn't help me to have a smart home if it doesn't create more homes.
Yes, thank you so much. There was this meeting, and as well, I would really like to say, come on, let's let's get together in this new alliance for the digitalization strategy and to open it up. Honestly, I'm not responsible for this strategy. That means there are, like the State Secretary Christian Rickertz, who is responsible for this strategy, and me, as I'm really struggling for housing questions, I'm not that close to this field of digitalization, but still, as I know how important it is to combine those questions, I would like to answer the second question, because as we are really fighting against Airbnb and platforms that like sell houses and sell the city in some points and breaking public rules, it means a lot to find like counter strategies, how to deal with those platforms and to stop them. And that's why it is super important to talk about what does digitalization means to the situation now, and how can we how do we have to talk about technopolitics and data politics to change the situation in housing, for example, as well.
I'll be very quick on this. So there is also a global alliance of cities that's called Sharing City Alliance, which actually is like cities coming together to negotiate together with the platforms. So we created it on purpose. It was launched in the Smart City Expo in Barcelona, so that cities have a joint approach when they're negotiating with Uber or Airbnb. Because we realized that obviously we all have the same problems. So a lot of these platforms have negative externalities. They have bad impact, sometimes on labor rights, other times on the price of housing. We cannot properly regulate because we have no access to the data. So one of the topics has been how they will share the data with the city so that we are able to regulate, because we see how this is affecting the housing market, the pricing, what are the neighborhoods, how we can maybe redistribute the affordable housing policy of the city to send more people in specific area. So it's absolutely important for a regulatory purpose to have access to this data. And I think even your chancellor, Angela Merkel one time says, yeah, we need algorithmic transparency, and we need to make sure that, this data and the algorithms are visible to all of us, because otherwise it's opaque and we cannot regulate. So obviously this doesn't create more housing. So you have then the affordable housing policy. Here in Berlin you want to expropriate a lot of housing. I hope you succeed if this housing are then put for social housing. In Barcelona, we are doing a lot of different things, building new houses, fine banks when they leave the houses empty for speculative reasons, and try to balance it out, So I think even there is not just a regulate, of course, then getting the companies to pay taxes, which is very important, because also this tax, if they pay the tax locally where the value is produced, then they can be reinvested to things that we care about and to the local economy. And then just to related to this question, of course we need incentives and investment into making the smart city possible. I know here in Germany now the development bank, the public development bank, has a strategy and a fund, 150 million yearly for cities that want to become smart and have projects, so you can apply, and the cities can apply also in coalitions with different groups and create coalitions that involve also civil society and other partners. So I think this is a great possibility to show that you can make projects that are funded in order to roll out new solutions.
So one quick remark only on ownership, and especially housing. I think Vienna shows an example of what could be done, and they have a tremendous rate what is owned by the city of Vienna, which means that it's rent stabilized, and the other more concern is how quickly something can change. People forget you have the change of government, and then you start a privatization round where you basically sell it off the market normally for more or less cheap, and then years on later what happens then in Berlin right now, maybe they with the energy grid, then you have to buy it back, or you should buy it back to a multiple of it. And so once you miss down the road, this has effects, especially in planning, we're talking about decades, which for people who are using software planning horizons of 2 to 6 months, let's say, which is already long term, this is a completely different game. That's, I think, one should consider always like, and I think we have another question from Victor, if I'm see it correctly. Yeah, go ahead.
So, hi, my name is Tori Birk, I'm from the Technologie-Stiftung Berlin. I have a question more on the type of leadership that a city might need in order to enact these kinds of policies and changes. One of my biggest issues, or rather one of the biggest deficits that I usually see in Berlin, from my personal opinion, is the lack of a chief digital officer of some kind, chief smart city officer, whatever you'd want to call it, but a single person that's sort of responsible for guiding and providing leadership on this policy. So my question would maybe be to Francesca, to what extent do you think your specific position and the power and influence that it grants you, or what role this has played in the ability of Barcelona to implement these changes, and then maybe for those representing more the perspective of Berlin, do you think that's something the city is actually lacking? Do you think that's something that would make a difference, or do you think that's not actually necessary?
Yeah, okay, thanks. So actually my story is also interesting because I'm not Catalan, I'm not Spanish, I'm Italian, and I used to work in the UK, in London. So actually the mayor brought me in, I mean she hired me, they created a specific role for this because they understood that basically it was not enough to have some general director somewhere responsible for the technology policy because they were affecting a lot of different changes in the city. So at the beginning she wanted to create a role like technology and the city chief, and then it became chief digital officer and so on. But anyways, I think it's absolutely important. But I want to emphasize that also, you know, she made a difficult choice to bring somebody from the outside with fresh ideas, different ideas, and also that, you know, may challenge sometimes the administration. I think you need a balance between bringing new ideas and be determined to implement them, but also work with the internal administration and the public officials and the workers and the unions to make it work, because otherwise you can't do it. But I think it's absolutely important, and many big cities are doing the same. So now then after my role, also London created a chief digital officer, Helsinki created a chief digital officer. Now you see that mostly big cities, they have my position. And I think it's also important where is the position and how you manage to work across the different departments. So I respond directly to the mayor, and then there is the city manager, and we created an innovation committee from the mayor where we can coordinate all the kind of different digital innovation teams in the city hall. And then finally, internally you need that structure, and you need that person. I even nominated a chief data officer, because I think also that is critical, because everybody was telling me, we don't know where the data is, and we don't know who is responsible. And they were looking like data, you know, to solve like really important problems, like very important issues about, you know, the climate and the housing and the economic, and nobody knew where the data was in the organization. So I was like, this has to change, right? And so this has to happen. But then again, important is how the city administration work with you guys, I mean, with all the local ecosystem. And not only big companies, academia and research centers, but also startups, civil society groups, citizens themselves. You need mechanisms. Basically, you need an innovation ecosystem locally to be able to implement these projects. Yeah.
Thank you. For questions, please go to the middle aisle because there's the microphone, so everybody can hear you.
Thank you. I'm Parminderjeet Singh from India IT for Change and a global network, which is JustNet Coalition. And we have been following the Barcelona project and your work very closely. So you said there is a coalition of cities now negotiating with platforms about data access, which is very good. But as you know, the data is the chief resource of the new companies. And there's a saying in India that if a horse befriends grass, what will it eat? So you really can't for a very long time expect people to give their main resource just by asking. The question is, what kind of reliance on hard law about who owns the data would you look forward to as things became universal and concrete? What I'm asking is that, do you think there is a need of a hard law which says that the data which people generate the cars in Berlin generate, which is non-personal data, belongs to Berliners first before it becomes a global commons. And just to shift the debate to developing countries, is that in developing countries, cities are not very homogeneous, city political systems are not very strong, and things often work at a higher political level. And India recently brought out a draft policy in which there is an idea of community data, which is the kind of thing that if data, which is even non-personal, but generated by groups and community, belongs to them. So my question really was that as we move into mainstreaming this everywhere, how much is the need of a hard law and hard political economy framework about not just personal data, but community data, and not just human rights around data, but economic rights around data? Thank you.
Great question, and I'm also familiar with your work, and I think you do a great job, so also really congratulations. And well, okay, so I think now this is a question that's becoming, it's gaining more traction and more attention from policymakers at very different level. So first of all, I think you're right that when it comes to data, we still know very little about what are the right institutional frameworks, what is the type of infrastructure, do we need hard law, do we don't? So we are really exploring, and we have some solutions, but I think we're still looking for something. For instance, at the end you said human rights and the economic rights. I think we're almost looking at some kind of human rights economics of data, because the data is not just a resource like everything else, like energy or water. It is also about our deeper, behavior, our what we like, what we don't like, our digital life, basically. And so it's something that it's in fact more about human rights. And so we need to combine the two approaches. Do we need a law? Where, here in Germany, people are talking about a law for data for all. Which may become a law, actually, but that's more to basically ask the big companies, mainly the monopoly players, to share data with everybody else, because otherwise they have a competitive advantage. And I think it's more linked to the kind of competition law, but also to an economic framework that would enable everybody to use that data. What we're doing in Barcelona is more at the level of public procurement. I think it's a great place to start. So if you would build these data sovereignty clauses, these are mandatory. So if they are part of a contract, you can enforce them. And this means that you start with the companies that provide services for the citizens. And that data, you can reclaim it back, and then you basically build this public repository or public infrastructure. But our idea is that the data should not be owned by the companies, but also shouldn't be owned by the state. The data belongs to the citizens, so that's what we call data sovereignty. And so basically what it means is that it's a common good, and you can regulate it. You can say the infrastructure should be with cryptographic control, so the people, we can use distributed ledgers like we do in Barcelona. We have a kind of blockchain with cryptographic control to access the data, and the citizen can decide what data they want to keep private, what data they want to share, with whom, and what are the terms and conditions. So I think there you can create a really new pact on data, that you establish a more democratic framework for access. So I think that that part of the infrastructure is important, and then the states could regain control over digital identity, that you can also implement in a distributed privacy enhancing way, not like the India model, but something different. But you can do it that way, and then you start getting the building blocks that will enable you to get back some of the control, because otherwise, citizens will say, what's my alternative, right? Anyways, I use an operating system, the data goes to Google, I use the platform of Facebook, the data goes to Facebook, then I use my Amazon. So we are in a very concentrated market situation. So we need to put out the alternatives so that people can start, using it. So we don't need only the laws, but we also need the alternative infrastructures in place.
So I think you need a regulation. You have the status quo, and you can see where that led us. There's barely any data sharing. I think there are great concepts out there with data stewardship. I think lately there was the example which now goes around from LA, where transport companies, if they want to use the street, they have to share the data back for using the street. That means, like, as a citizen, I can find out which means of transport I can use to go from A to B, whereas, for example, the e-scooter located, whereas the public transportation, and whereas, for example, bike sharing. And this can't happen without any kind of regulation. I think if step further would be next to the city level, it has to be regulated in competitive law in the European Union, which was like lacking there for years and for several reasons. That's currently is looking at least that it could be changing, depending how it will develop. But this has to be hard enforced. And I would say from my experience, cities has to be as brass as startups. I mean, you're dealing with a bunch of different kind of culture where the rule is to break the rule, and in order to create a counterweight towards it, you also have to enforce it like in that area and not dealing with it like it's like the nice mom and pop shop around the corner when it's actually a company valued above $1 billion. So there's a difference if you have a startup with 2 people breaking the law, or if you have like a corporation worth $1 billion breaking the same law with violating labor rights, markets and stuff like that.
But I mean, because this is a very important question, I think we have a lot to experiment in terms of new institutions and governance models around data. But at the same time, I think my approach is always, instead of just cleaning the mess afterwards, now we see we have lots of problems with monopoly power, with privacy, with breaches of data, I mean, right, for the big platforms, and then we go and ask Facebook, can you please fix it? I mean, I'm not sure this is the right approach. We want to have alternative infrastructures as well. And I mean, now, for instance, Europe has they're investing 300 million on blockchains. Right, you can use blockchains not only for the financial sector, you can use decentralized encrypted infrastructure for data control. And we have a lot of privacy knowledge in Europe, like the best cryptographers are in Europe. They are developers, they are security experts. We have the capacity to build an alternative infrastructure and a model for data ownership that's more democratic. So I would say we have to really concentrate in building these kind of alternatives.
Building and be more bold. I mean, there's sometimes I think Europe is lacking there the vision to actually do something, or depending on somebody else, where there will not be anybody else. Like the US will do their things in their favor, and China will do their things in their favor. So that's what I mean. It basically would time to act, and cities had at least a chance doing it cross-border easily.
So now we need a manifesto of people signing those things we need to bring in the knowledge. This is like what we really need.
Yeah, actually I can go on with that. My question relates to the question before, the last one. If someone, and it's a question for you, Katalin. I'm Ella Lager, I work for Demos Helsinki, a Finnish think tank. My question is, if someone like Francesca agreed to come to Berlin and do the same, commit the same wonder as she did in Barcelona, obviously, within 3 years, what would have to happen in this, let's say in the municipality, for her to be able to be successful, and where could that change come from as a seat?
I think
I guess hiring her is one thing, but for her to be successful, I guess there's more that needs to change. That's my assumption.
Yeah, thank you very much, because I think we really have to think about the next steps. I was wondering now during the talk, maybe we need a referendum on those things, because usually what happens in Berlin is that there's like people elected to the parliament taking care of a lot of things, but there's like people in the streets asking for different things. So we had a lot of referendums during the last years asking for really on big questions. And maybe we need this, because what I see is like a big gap, and between those conversations and things we see, what we could do if we look to Francesca and to Barcelona and what could happen. But then we see we didn't really get further. I mean, we are now discussing on a strategy on participation for Berlin, which will be fixed this year in summer. I said, okay, guys, if we are talking about participation, we definitely have to talk about digital participation and how to make sure that the digital platform can take care of all the things we want to widen up for participation in city planning. But now we see there's like a clear border. You don't really can enter this door because we still have meinberlin.de, and there is no real like lobby asking for having Decidim. I mean, we have people in Berlin now asking for bringing in Decidim as a communication and participation platform, but there are just a few. So I think we really have to look for alliances, and really have to look for the next elections to clearly, yeah, I mean, this is what, I mean, we really stuck in totally other complicated things like the housing issue and so on. So we definitely cannot not care about the digitalization strategy and digitalization policy. But what we really, like me as a citizen of Berlin, I would say, let's really clearly look at the next elections. Let's now hack the City Lab idea, bring in, I mean, they want to deal, or we as Berlin want to deal in the City Lab with governance, politics, policy. So what does it mean? What does governance mean? I mean, it means a lot. And it also has to be questioned by the people. So let's hack those processes to, make clear what has to be done in the next elections. And then, of course, I agree, we need something who is responsible on this, but then there should be like a clearly movement asking for those questions, because if not, it could happen that there will be just somebody doing their own thing. I mean, to have one CEO can mean having somebody who has an idea of all those things we maybe agree about, but it could also mean having somebody who has totally different ideas and going to buy packages from Microsoft. I mean, this really needs a citizen-based background.
And then, but right now,
I mean, at the end of the day, that's the policy that decides. Yes, I agree. Yes.
So we had you like 2 years ago, and I think there are some colleagues somewhere in the audience, I don't see it right now, who are working on the Transparenzgesetz in Berlin, which means like a transparency law similar to the one in Hamburg, and like for 2 years they're working off their asses and nothing is happening. And if you're a bystander, you wonder why nothing is happening. I mean, it's not rocket science. Same thing happens with open data, not rocket science either. We are still waiting on a lot of improvements. And it's like
no, but I mean, anyways, just to be nice, I mean, I think in the city of Berlin, the person that's responsible for the agenda comes also from this kind of community background, you know, used to be very close to kind of, I think, Wikipedia even, like he was working with.
Wikipedia before that,
yeah, so I mean, he understands a lot of this kind of policy lines and issues, and I mean, definitely there is a lot of improvement. I mean, Berlin is part of the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights, and definitely, I mean, I'm looking forward for this strategy now that will come up, but I think it always goes both ways, you know. The city officials have to do their part, but also, you know, if they don't have pressure from lots of different community groups and the company side and so on, it goes lower. So you always have to find this kind of good balance between the two. Yeah.
Hi, Lucia is my name. I have 2 questions now. Actually, I just had one before. So the first one is, what does it actually mean in the context of Barcelona to be a digital citizen? Because I'm a foreigner living in Berlin, and I completely left out of the political discussion. There's no place where we can. For me, I'm also a designer, specialized in participatory processes. So I know very well that inclusion is not enough. Like being included in a survey or in a one-day decision, design thinking thing, it's not enough. So how do you deal with that? And the second one is for you more related with how you were now explaining the participation and the difference between what the Berlin government is trying to reach, or they are willing to reach, and what people is actually asking in this gap between both. shouldn't be the other way if you are really thinking on participatory processes, and if people is asking for something, shouldn't the government start looking for what people is asking, because people it's not stupid normally, and I still like to believe that. So if people is asking for something else, isn't it the participatory perspective to hear what people is asking for instead of waiting them to ask the correct question?
Yeah, we take the second question as well from, I think, Helene.
Hi, my name is Helen. I've been active in the field of open data and human rights for almost a year. I'm based in Berlin. And I'm a bit frustrated if you say that the government does not see all the initiatives and all the ecosystems that we actually built over the last more than 10 years. So I'm really kind of, so maybe the government has to open their eyes and ears and be more responsive as well to what the citizens are actually asking and to what civil society groups are actually asking of you, because what we want is data and what we want is knowledge and what we want is to work together with you. But the problem is that we are not often seen or not often invited to the consultations. And I'm also talking about the digital agenda now that you're designing. So my question is, what is the next step, and who gets to participate in the process that you've been talking about? Because what I want to avoid is that the city of Berlin and many other German cities kind of jump on this idea to put human rights in the center of the debate, but how can we hold you accountable to that promise? Because in the past, you did not necessarily prove that to be the case. Thank you.
Yes. Well, I answer first so that you get the difficult Berlin questions. No, but, well, on both things, I mean, I think also they had a lot of things in common, the two questions. And, well, on the first one, digital citizenship, broad question, because, I mean, it can be, do you have rights to vote? Do you have the same rights of the other cities? So it's a lot about diversity and welcoming the other people into integrating in the city. So, well, Barcelona is like super championing this. So I think we are on that kind of side of really trying to integrate, and the diversity model is super important. But then on the participatory processes for real, that is not just consultation. I mean, we got really much beyond that. And not only through this participation process in the digital democracy platform, that is a hybrid. So the digital by itself, it doesn't work. So you should not ask people just vote here as it is Facebook democracy. No. Then you have to integrate that with like neighborhood by neighborhood engagement with citizens. And we're also doing, for instance, we have some processes about participatory urban planning and co-design of services with citizens, where we invite people like you. Maybe they do like experience user-centered design. We have an agreement with a service design school in Barcelona, where they have methods for involving groups into shaping policy projects and also delivering services. So we are doing a lot of experiments like that. And I always say, look, this is not easy. So people sometimes, they come to us and they say, well, on one side it's like, oh, people don't want to participate. So, you know, this is very dangerous and you're not going to get results. In my experience, this is not true. As you said, also people are super active. In Barcelona and in Catalonia, super active, the citizens, and also at community level, there are lots of projects that already have the answers. So it's more governments that are not able to open up and integrate the collective intelligence. Absolutely. I mean, this is really the problem. And so you have to have a strong political will to change the process and make sure that this is happening, right? And this goes much beyond this consultation process and all of that. I mean, we have created a department that deals with civic rights and citizen participation. So we really like betting on that as the model to run public institutions. And I would say, you know, this is critical for Europe, because we see that otherwise people are disenfranchised. They don't trust public institutions anymore. They say, you have no plan for my future? Why should I even pay taxes? And then they vote right-wing populists, you know, that start doing the kind of rising to power that we see. So it's absolutely important to say the alternative to that is more democracy and not less democracy, and let's do it together. So I'm really completely on board. And the accountability side, this is also so now we have this human rights-centered politics. First of all, the Manifesto for Technological Sovereignty, that wasn't just a city initiative. So we had like a network of experts recognized in the field that, you know, also from communities and human rights lawyers and people that are working a lot on this, which advised us. And then we open it up. A lot of cities now are like, you know, taking it on board, giving feedback. So there is a constant feedback. And we have to be able to show, I mean, you have to be able to basically see that we are actually applying those principles into the real politics that we do. And so that is always keeping like a channel open. I mean, in Barcelona, we went very far like that. We have an encrypted infrastructure. It's called Bustia Etica. We use Tor. It's the same technology that WikiLeaks uses. And we use it for any citizen can denounce cases of corruption or ask something to the government, keeping their anonymity. And we are like really, we have a committee for transparency, and we are acting on this kind of thing. So it can be some good feedback, or it can be something that is denouncing a case of corruption. I think we are probably the first city that integrate this infrastructure into the city administration.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I didn't have an easy role here because I'm not responsible for this.
Now you are.
No, I'm not. And I couldn't. So, I mean, I'm responsible for city development, tourism, and smart city in terms of stopping the neoliberal idea of smart city. When I met Francesca the first time, I said, I'm totally against smart city. And she said, no, you should have an idea of a counter strategy from the left side, from bottom up. So that was the point that I decided, okay, let's have a look for guys like Walter and try to bring them together. So just to clarify this, my role is to open the door to the parliament, but I cannot, because I'm not a professional in all those things, but I see my role to open this door to the people who know what to do and could do better. What's happening now is that we are working since 2 years, for your question, since 2 years we're working on a strategy on guiding lines of participation, and this will be, if the parliament says yes, what I really hope, then we will really open the participation in this city for people to get knowledge, get information, to have the right to intervene and so on. But we are now in the end of the phase to do this, and it's really for me important. I'm not against this coalition. I'm a big fan, and we are doing a lot of good things, but we have a lot of things to do as well. So this field we are talking about now is definitely a big task to do, and as well, if we are sitting here with like the most or the best role example of getting an idea of data politics in Europe, like what you do in Barcelona. It's of course a big gap you have in between. So I would say there is this City Lab process you really have to get into, because this could be a good place to talk about what do we need, how do we want to intervene, and what do we see for the future of the city. The second thing is this alliance around the digitalization strategy, and there will be a meeting in 14th of June. The place is unfortunately not clear yet, but probably it will be in the parliament. But for this, you could also ask Walter, because I will tell him the place. So everybody who's interested, please join, and then let's really get together.
Yeah, so sharpen your pencils for the digitalization strategy, or copy and paste the best examples. The wording is on GitHub. There's like Boris back there somewhere from who is working on DCDM, and I think there are a lot of initiatives actually in Berlin which has the huge luck that for whatever reasons there's a amazing digital community, so get together and do some great things for your own community, because probably the city itself won't do it that quick.
So just like the last sentence from me, we really need Berlin. I mean, I always say this. I mean, yesterday even I said, like, actually with Minister Scholz, I said, like, I think Berlin can become the capital of this ethical, democratic, digital society that we need, because you have everything here. I mean, you have the best people, the best movements. I mean, lots of brain, universities, the companies, the startups. Like, you have like really everything we need, and also movements that have built this kind of human rights approach in technology and cryptography and privacy at the very core of it, and are aware of the implication of technology. So I think Berlin really should lead, and this means that also we can create a European real vision for that, because otherwise if we are isolated, I mean, no cities, no matter how good we are, we have to work in a network, and we need Europe to really step up and make this vision a reality. So I am really confident that, you know, Berlin will be like leading the way. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Katalin. Thank you so much, Francesca, and we see hopefully you again in 2 years again, where we have a great update from Berlin, and the rest of you happy Republica and great other sessions, and help the city. Thank you.
We